Welcome, everybody. This is Jen Farmer. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And I just wanted to let you know I will be leading today's webinar, but we actually have several of our project team members here in the room with us. So I think that will be helpful for later on today when you have the opportunity to ask questions. But just to let you know who's here with me, we have Ken McElroy, Kelly Wilson, Whitney Garney, Jordan Nealon, and Kat Cadnack. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder, actually, for other project team members of yours that might be unable to participate today, we are going to record this webinar, and it will be posted to our website here in the near future. Okay, so let's get started with a few objectives for today's webinar. We will spend some time reviewing key dates and information, telling you a little bit more about the application process, discussing some of our funding priorities, as well as funding expectations. This is going to be a really brief overview of content. So more importantly for today, in addition to going over some of this information, we really wanted to provide an opportunity for questions if you have any so far in the application process. So you can submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the chat box, but we will actually unmute everyone at the end of the presentation to be able to ask questions at that time. So feel free to send them ahead if you think of them as we go along. All right, so a few important dates to mention, the first of which is our intent to apply due date. So this is not a requirement, but it does help us prepare for the application review process. If you decide that you're going to apply, we just ask that you let us know that by February 6th. And we have a due date for the application itself. It's February 21st. We also anticipate being able to notify all selected innovators by April 5th. And a little bit different than this past year with projects starting May 1st, we actually will be starting the next round of funded projects on July 1st. And hopefully you've all had a chance to talk to your project liaisons and seen this reflected in your contracts. But all of the current ITP3 projects were extended through June 30th. So this will just allow a natural alignment of year one to year two projects, but it also will help with future funding contracts. We won't have to worry about the amendment process during the second year because July 1st aligns with the federal funding year. And lastly, the other important date that I wanted to highlight is the training workshop that we are planning to host for innovators that are funded for an additional year of funding. So this is not for all current ITP3 innovators. But if you're selected to receive an additional year of funding, this training workshop would be applicable to you. We're still working to finalize the dates and the location, but we do know that it will be located somewhere close to us here in Texas, and the training will take place sometime in the week of May 22nd through the 25th. So at this point, I just really encourage you all to reserve that date range on your calendar to make sure if you're selected to receive funding, one or possibly two of your project team members are able to attend that training. We can talk a little bit more about that training later on if you have any additional questions. Okay, so a little bit more information about this particular funding opportunity. So the first is just to make sure that everybody is on the same page regarding the two applications that we currently have available to innovators. In the application that we're reviewing today is only an application for current ITP3 innovators. More importantly, you only use this application if you're seeking an additional year of funding to continue the development of your current ITP3 project. We do have one additional application that is out there with a due date of January 30th that is for new innovative projects. We expect that there'll be quite a few non-ITP3 innovators that do submit applications in response to this funding opportunity, but as ITP3 Innovators, you are also eligible to apply to this particular application. Just make sure to remember that you submit to your proposed project to the correct application. If you have any questions about that, definitely contact me by email, and I can provide additional information. But to help streamline that process, we've tried to keep the applications separate so that that hopefully reduces confusion. The application for new innovative projects is available through the main part of our website, and the application that you will use to continue the development of your project is only accessible to ITP3 Innovators through our portal. Okay, so an additional point I wanted to clarify just from a few questions that we've received by email. Considering that you are our first cohort of ITP3 Innovators, I just wanted to explain that all applicants selected in response to these applications for next year's funding, we are referring to as Cohort 2. So that really is representative of applicants that respond to with both new project ideas as well as current ITP3 Innovators asking to continue the development of their project. So for that reason, if we use the terminology Cohort 2, just know that we're referencing those that receive funding in response to both of these applications. On that same note, I wanted to point out that while we are able to fund a total of 15 organizations this previous year, that the number of awards actually is significantly less this year. Between the two applications, we will be able to fund approximately 6 to 8 organizations for the development of their projects. And again, that number 6 to 8 does apply for both applications. And the reason we were able to award so many last year is we were able to combine funding streams. As far as the range of funding, you'll find that it's similar to last year, although we've dropped the floor on the level of funding depending on what is needed for you in this next year of program development. The range is actually $25,000 to $100,000 that you can apply for. And just make sure you note, just like this year, that range of funding actually includes indirect costs as well. And lastly, the only other thing to mention is that this particular funding will last for 12 months, and with projects starting July 1st, 2017, they will be ending June 30th of 2018. All right, so now I just wanted to move on to funding priorities. And you'll notice here I have Cohort 1 and Cohort 2 funding priorities. I wanted to bring these up specifically because this application allows you to continue the development of the project that was initially funded in response to last year's funding, an application for funding. So more specifically, with that application, we specifically were looking for programs that took an innovative approach to teen pregnancy prevention, and that they also focused on a high-risk population currently underserved by our existing evidence-based programs. But I also wanted to share with you our funding priorities for year 2. The funding priorities I have on the screen here actually come from our application for new innovative projects. However, I've included them on this slide and in the webinar because they really align with our overall vision for Cohort 2. And because of that, you'll see language that references these different priorities within your application. So just to acknowledge those for those of you that might just be joining us by phone, I wanted to read those 3 quickly to you. For Cohort 2 funding priorities include apply innovative strategies to design teen pregnancy prevention programs, utilize a systems-based approach for teen pregnancy prevention, and/or focus on impacting a high-risk vulnerable population currently underserved by our existing programs. Okay, so now I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the actual application. To begin with, this application is submitted through the portal only as an online application, unlike last year where you had the opportunity to respond to either the RFA format or online. We've felt that this was a great option considering the simplified version of this year's application. So if you have any questions or concerns with that process, please feel free to contact us, but everything is completed through the ITP3 portal. And on that same note, if you are working with others outside of your project team to submit this application and need additional access for individuals beyond those that currently have access to the portal, please make sure to let us know. Okay, so there are really 3 different components for this application. The first of which is an opportunity to share with us what you have accomplished during year 1. More importantly, it's really an opportunity to reflect on those activities and document what has been accomplished, as well as tell us more about what you have planned for the rest of year 1. I know you've had a chance to talk with your project liaisons on a monthly basis and keep them informed of these activities, but this is really an opportunity for you to tell all of the ITP3 project team about the work that you're doing. In addition, it's also an opportunity for you to put that reflection in writing. We really tried to design our questions within the application in a way that's useful for you, for your program development team. More specifically, we want you to consider your responses in a way that will be helpful for you, particularly if your project is taken to scale in the future. Think of this as a form of documentation that could be helpful for your project team or others that choose to replicate or even adapt your program later on. So for that reason, we actually have not set forth any text box limits for your responses to individual questions or even the overall application. So I know lack of guidance might be helpful for some and frustrating for others, but again, it really is just to allow you to document what you feel like is necessary in response to questions related to year 1. The next part of this application is asking you about your plan for year 2. We want to know about the program development activities that you have planned, both in writing in response to guided questions, but also through a work plan. And in addition to the work plan, the other document that we'll be looking for is the budget narrative to tell us about your year 2 work. One particular component that I really wanted to highlight for year 2, you'll notice within the application, if you've had a chance to look through it already, is we actually have encouraging words for our innovators to consider the social ecological model and reflect on what they've learned this past year through their needs assessment activities, through other program development activities that you've been involved in, and really determine if there's a way for your program to benefit by expanding its current level of intervention. All of the innovators that are funded through ITP3 currently really do have unique program designs, and for that reason we've just used the terminology of encourage, because we know that that approach and decision will look different for everybody. But I do encourage you to really think deeply about the changes that you might be able to make to your project. And there are questions within the application that allow you to explain why you do or do not make those changes, and to think through that process a little bit more. On that same note, I know that many of you were already able to participate in some of our previous webinar opportunities, but if you have not had a chance to do so already, I encourage you to check out the webinar section of our website, and there is a recording of the Policy Systems and Environmental Levels of Change webinar that was recorded earlier in the fall. And I think that will provide you with a more in-depth overview of this information. But of course, if you have any extra questions, you're welcome to ask them today or later on by email. All right, so the final component of the application, and of course this is actually outside of the online application that you submit, is an opportunity to tell us more about your work verbally rather than just in writing. We have a Tell Us More pitch that we're planning to host March 6th through 10. More specific information on that will come out in the future, but please make sure you hold those dates on your calendar. And if you already know that some of those dates are not going to work for you, feel free to let us know. Just send me a note by email, and I can make sure to make note of that. We particularly want to use this time for you to provide a summary of your program, but also an opportunity for us to ask follow-up questions because we will be in the middle of the review process at that time. Okay, so funding expectations, the other another area that I wanted to make sure to highlight, and you'll notice that this looks very similar to our current year, but specifically just an opportunity to continue to work with the ITP3 team related to capacity building, and we are brainstorming new ways to continue to evolve the capacity building assistance that we plan to offer, including the training format that we mentioned earlier in the call. So I look forward for more exciting information and changes related to that process in the future. And an additional one is many of you are going to be moving into the actual program development stage where you might be ready for pilot testing in the future. So if you are proposing a project that incorporates pilot testing, we'll just make sure you just need to make sure to incorporate time for medical accuracy review within your work plan. If you have more specific questions about that, you can send me an email. We have received clarification from the Office of Adolescent Health that medical accuracy review is not required for feasibility testing. However, it is required for full-scale pilot testing. Continuing to participate in the joint evaluation process that should look very similar to what you're currently doing by submitting monthly reports using our database. And then lastly is just continuing the approval from IRB, which hopefully will be a simplified process compared to this previous year because we'll be able to amend current project protocols that have been previously approved. Okay. So we have officially made it through all of my slides. I know that that was a really brief overview. All of this information is outlined within your application, but also within the portal there is a page specifically to highlight the application information itself, and you're able to print a document of it in addition to just accessing the questions online. So bear with me just a minute while we unmute everyone, and we'll look through the questions that we have. While we do that, let me just ask everybody, by taking so many people off of mute, it would be very helpful if you can go ahead and mute your own phone or computer, whatever you're using. That way we just don't have as much feedback. So we'll try this and hopefully it works. But okay, so do we have any questions so far? Everybody's off of mute now, I think. You guys are going to make this really simple if nobody has questions.
Hi, Jen. This is Genevieve. How are you from Healthy Teen Network?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. So I have a question. So in your consideration for the continuation of funding for the next year, are there certain things that you're looking in terms of how the project has progressed? Like, are you giving more consideration of people that are either continuing in a formative phase or they're moving into development or they're moving into pilot testing? Or is there anything in particular that you're trying to prioritize?
That's a great question. Really just remembering that these applications that your initial applications were in response to slightly different funding priorities. That we're not asking those to be changed or for you to propose any significant changes to the overall design, other than if you have an opportunity to expand your level of intervention. For that reason, I think we've acknowledged that everybody is moving through this process at different speeds, really based on what they've proposed, because each project does look different. Long-winded response to saying no, there's not a priority based on where they currently are. Other than, I think it's very important that progress has been made throughout the year, and that's something that you can make sure to articulate in response to those questions themselves. So just just helping us understand where you are, why you're there, and what you plan to do afterwards. And you know, the other piece is, for us as a project team, we really do hope to have a promising portfolio of programs at the end. So thinking about what's feasible for your team to accomplish is helpful, especially if it moves it further along in the development process. But we don't have any specific framework set forth for what we expect innovators to be able to accomplish in 12 months. Just looking at what you have and the funding amount that's feasible. Does that answer your question, Genevieve?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Probably too much detail, sorry. Okay, so are there any we've got a question online that I'm reading. Are there any word limits for each section of the online renewal format? So just to let everybody know, as far as word limits, no, there's not. And that really is set up that way to allow you to respond in a way that's most applicable to your particular project. If helpful, you could, you know, look at our current application that's out there. There is an online application for new projects, and that has suggested guidance, but we really are not using that by in reviewing these. Okay, I don't have any other any other questions within the chat box. So, oh, never mind. Okay, hold on one second. So this is the question that is it's asking about balancing, how we plan to balance our awards between new projects and current ITP3 innovators. Just to let everybody know, sorry, I was trying to read the last part of that question, but all of those decisions will actually be made at the same time. We do have very specific funding priorities for the new innovative projects, and because of those funding priorities, I think the pool of applicants might be narrow for those that will be eligible. We do really intend to focus on our current innovator projects because we want as many people as possible to be able to continue with the development process. We don't have a firm number. It's the decision that will really be made based on the applications that are received in our proposal. Okay, so there's another question regarding flexibility in the pitch dates. Currently, we have the date range set for March 6th through 10th. That's not the pitch number one. Those are the dates that we have set forth, and we've not discussed being able to move that timeline around at all. Specifically, that's because we have a lot of different pieces that go into the review of both our new application as well as current innovator applications. So those are the dates that we have to work with. But what I also wanted to point out is it's not necessary for the entire project team to be involved in the pitch. That's going to be a decision made by your particular project. If that date range does not work for anybody and there's nothing that you can do about it, you can reach out to us, but as of right now, there's not any flexibility. Oh, great question about whether or not you should incorporate travel for the May training within your budget for year 2. No, actually not, because that's an expense that will be covered entirely by the ITP3 project team. So you do not need to incorporate it, and really that's because we're asking this training to take place, asking you to take part in this training in May, while actual projects do not begin until July 1st. There's a question about whether applicants will be judged on multiple levels of influence within the ecological model approach. For example, will more levels be more desirable? And anybody else from our project team can contribute, but I will just pitch in that I think that is very difficult to provide a specific answer to because each project does look different. More importantly, I think it's the justification that goes into what's being proposed and why. So don't propose additional levels just for the sake of having additional levels. We really wanted to make sure that it's a good fit with your project design. And we've got a question about being able to use PowerPoint presentations for the oral pitches. Actually, I'm not going to provide a response to that just yet. We will provide more information to you regarding the pitch in the future. So however is easiest for you to prepare for that for now is fine, but do know you'll receive more specific information, especially about the format in the near future. Apologies for not giving you an answer. Okay, we're looking through all of our questions, and I think that we've answered everything so far that's been submitted through the chat box. Anybody else have a question? Okay, so one question related to the number of total number of innovators that will be selected for cohort 2. So we anticipate the number will be 6 to 8 innovators, and that is from both applications, so those that are submitting a new project as well as current innovators asking to continue the development of their project. So unfortunately that number is much smaller, but mentioned earlier that a larger number for this year we were able to combine funding years and support a larger number of organizations. Oh, I have a point for clarification. No, it's actually 6 to 8 total, so not 6 to 8 from each application, 6 to 8 total from both applications combined. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So I have one other slide that I wanted to share with you all. If you have questions while I'm going over this next slide, go ahead and submit them to chat box. You're all still, unmuted, so that's fine if you want to just ask a question once I review this slide as well. Okay, so this past week you hopefully all received an email from our project team that was seeking webinar abstracts for hopefully an exciting webinar we plan to host later in February that's focused on helping others share their story about the work, the adolescent health and teen pregnancy prevention work that they're doing. More specifically, we hope to, as the IC3 project team, host this webinar, but allow our innovators to present content related to tips and tools that others can use to help get their story out there. This really is, I think, a very important opportunity for us to share information because OAH has strongly encouraged grantees to get out there and promote the work that they're doing and the impact of their programs, even if their programs are in the development process. And that's because our project is funded through a continuing resolution. These legislators are actually meeting at the end of April to make a decision regarding the status of our funding, whether or not it will be maintained at level funding, the opportunity for it to be reduced or potentially cut altogether. So there's definitely a lot of strong reason, I think, to get out there and to share this information. But more importantly, knowing that there's a lot of folks that might not have had the opportunity to do this, we really thought of this webinar as a chance to give pointers, tips, tools, that sort of thing to the public. So this webinar will be open to the public. We plan on hosting the webinar on February 24th, which is a Friday. We know the turnaround time is very quick, so apologies for that. But we're asking if you have an abstract idea to submit that to us by next Friday, February 27th. And we will work as quickly as possible to let those that are selected to present know by February 1st. And that'll allow us an opportunity to work together closer to presentation time to make sure we're all prepared to share that information. But let us know if you have any questions about that. I just wanted to make sure to use this time, since so many of you are on the call, to bring that to your attention. Okay, so I don't think that we've received any other questions. Last opportunity for anybody to bring them up by phone or chat box. And if not, I will just say thank you for participating, and we look forward to your application. Continue the great work that you're doing, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.